The galaxy is full of names. Names of species who built empires, who discovered stars, who ruled for thousands of years. Their names echo in songs, in archives, in the proud mouths of their descendants. But there was one name that does not exist anymore. One species whose memory was cut away so completely that even their enemies cannot recall the sound of it. No one speaks that name. No one dares. Because it belonged to the last species that made humans angry. Far away, in the grand halls of the Galactic Council, where light from newborn stars shines through crystal ceilings, the elders gathered. Their faces were ancient, their voices older than most civilizations. They carried knowledge of millions of years. Yet when the subject of that forgotten species arose, they grew quiet. Even the strongest among them lowered their gaze. A young alien historian broke the silence. His voice was trembling, but curiosity burned inside him. Great ones, why is there no record of them? What crime did they commit? And who destroyed them? The chamber turned cold. For a long while, no one answered. The only sound was the hum of the starlight engines that kept the chamber afloat in the void. Finally, one elder spoke, her voice like cracked stone. You are too young to understand. There are wounds in this galaxy that are not spoken of. There are names that are not names anymore. They were erased. But who erased them? The historian pressed. Humans, the elder said simply. The word itself made the chamber heavier. Across the galaxy, humans were not the oldest race, nor the most advanced. They did not control the greatest fleets, nor did they possess the deadliest weapons. And yet, no one underestimated them anymore. Because humans had something rare, something no archive could measure. They had wrath. Not anger, not hatred, but wrath, the kind that burns slow and deep, the kind that destroys not only bodies but legacies. The historian swallowed hard. His voice dropped to a whisper. What did that species do? No elder wanted to recall it. But fragments of memory haunted them all. Once, long ago, when humans were still spreading to the stars, the forgotten species mocked them. They called humans reckless children of Earth. They sneered at their colonies. They laughed at their small ships. At first, humans ignored the insults. They were busy building, dreaming, reaching. But then the species crossed a line no one should ever cross. They struck at something sacred. They destroyed a human colony. It was not a military base. It was not a fortress world. It was a place of families, farmers, workers, children. They erased it from the sky as if it were nothing. For them, it was a message. They wanted to show the galaxy that humans were weak, that their fire could be smothered before it grew. But what they did not know was that humans do not forget. The council chamber seemed to shiver as the memory came alive again. The elder's voice shook as he spoke. When the colony burned, humanity did not shout. They did not beg. They became silent. And in that silence, something terrible began to move. In the dark shipyards of Sol, humans built in secret. Their fleets vanished from ordinary patrols. Their worlds seemed quiet, almost abandoned. But beneath that quiet, something was gathering. Ships larger than anyone had ever seen. Weapons darker and sharper than any in living memory. The forgotten species did not take the warning. They sent spies. Few returned. Those who did came back broken, whispering in fear. The storm is coming. The human storm. The historian could not breathe. His chest felt tight as if the weight of that silence pressed against him. And what happened? When the storm came, he asked. The elder leaned closer, his eyes glowing with old terror. What happened? They vanished. Not a trace left. Their fleets were crushed. Their cities turned to dust. Their stars made empty. And then, even their name was erased. Every archive, every library, every memory. Gone. The historian's hands shook. Why erase even the name? The elder answered slowly, each word heavy as a planet. Because to destroy them was punishment, but to erase them was judgment. Humans did not want revenge remembered. They wanted it forgotten. The chamber grew so quiet that even the stars outside seemed distant. The historian finally understood why no one spoke that name, why no record could be found. It was not just fear of humans. It was a lesson. The lesson was simple. Never make humans angry. For when humans rise in wrath, not only will your people be destroyed, but your very memory will be cut out of history, as if you never existed. And so the forgotten name drifted into nothingness, swallowed by silence deeper than any black hole. The stars still burned, but no one would ever speak that species' name again. The galaxy remembered silence, but before silence came the spark. And every spark begins with an insult. Long before their name was erased, the forgotten species stood tall and proud. They were old, older than humanity, with empires stretching across dozens of stars. Their fleets were vast, their libraries ancient, their arrogance unshaken. To them, humans were nothing more than children crawling into the stars, eager but foolish. At first, their insults came as laughter. When humans built their first interstellar colonies, the forgotten species mocked. "Look at them," they said in council halls. "They plant farms on dead rocks. They call themselves explorers. They are still apes pretending to be gods." The word spread quickly. Other alien races listened, some agreeing, some staying silent, but none daring to defend humanity. For at that time, humans were still small compared to the great powers. But the insults did not stop at words. The species began to test humanity's patience. They blocked trade routes. They interfered with human ships. They treated human ambassadors as if they were nothing but pests. Their arrogance grew so large that they believed no consequence would come. And yet, humans did not answer. On Earth and her colonies, leaders advised patience. They whispered, "Do not show anger. Let them speak. Let them laugh." Humans knew the value of silence. But inside that silence, something was building. The insult that broke patience was not spoken in a council hall. It was written in fire across the sky. On a quiet colony world, green fields, rivers shining under twin suns, families lived in peace. Children played among the stones, parents worked the soil, and the settlers dreamed of building a new home. There were no armies here, no weapons, no soldiers. Just ordinary humans reaching for a future. Then, one night, the forgotten species arrived. At first, the settlers thought it was a storm. Flashes of light across the heavens, rumbles in the distance. But when the ground shook and fire rained from above, they realized the truth. Warships filled the sky, and those warships came not to talk, but to erase. The invaders called it a lesson. They wanted to remind humanity of their place in the galaxy. They thought to teach them fear, to show them that the stars were owned by older, stronger races. But what they truly did was light the fire of wrath. The colony burned. Homes turned to ash. Families ran, but there was nowhere to run. The warships gave no mercy. They left nothing but smoke and ruin. From orbit, the forgotten species sent one message across the stars. This is the fate of those who rise too fast. They believed the lesson would humble humanity. They believed humans would bow their heads, beg for peace, and stay silent. But they were wrong. The message reached Earth. It reached every colony, every ship, every human settlement. Across the stars, humans did not scream. They did not beg. They grew silent, colder than the void itself. And in that silence, the first spark of wrath was born. Other alien races felt the change, though they did not understand it. Traders reported that humans no longer smiled during deals. Ambassadors spoke little. Fleets began to move quietly, shifting in patterns that no one could predict. Something unseen was building, like thunder hiding behind the clouds. Still, the forgotten species laughed. They told the galaxy, "See, humans are nothing." They did not even answer. They cannot answer. But they mistook silence for weakness. One elder of the council later recalled that time. He said, "I remember the first insult. I remember the colony burning. But what I remember most was the silence that followed. It was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of sharpening blades. For humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. When their children were killed, when their homes were burned, when their families were mocked, humans began to prepare. Not with loud words, not with open threats, but with patience, with shadows, with the kind of quiet that chills the bones. The historian who listened to these words shivered. He realized then that the insult was not only an attack, it was an awakening. The forgotten species had not taught humanity fear. They had taught them wrath. And when wrath grows, it waits. It sharpens. Plans. The elder leaned close to the historian and spoke one final warning. The first insult was their last chance. They could have stopped. They could have stepped back. But they did not. And that was their second mistake. The council chamber fell silent again, heavy with memory. The story of the insult was only the beginning. What came next would shake the galaxy itself. Silence spread across human worlds. It was not the silence of fear, but the silence of preparation. The forgotten species believed they had taught humans a lesson by burning their colony, but in truth, they had lit a fire that would not go out. In the hidden shipyards of Sol, deep inside the asteroid belts and on the cold moons of Jupiter, humans began to build. They did not announce it. They did not boast. They simply worked. Sparks flew in dark factories. Engines were tested in secret caverns. Designs older species had never seen before were being forged in steel and fire. The galaxy watched, but they did not understand. Alien scouts came close, trying to see what the humans were creating. Many never returned. Those who did came back pale and broken, whispering words no one wanted to hear. They are building something vast. They are not making warships. They are making monsters. The storm is coming. But the forgotten species laughed. They told their allies, humans are children. They cannot face us. They build in shadows because they are afraid. What they did not see was the patience of humanity. Humans knew how to wait. They had learned patience on Earth through centuries of war and struggle. And now, across the stars, they waited like hunters in tall grass. The silence was heavier than any speech. On Earth, the government spoke little, but they gave their industries only one command: prepare. Factories turned from building homes to building armor. Science turned from exploration to destruction. Even poets and artists grew quiet, their works dark and heavy, as if the whole race knew what was coming. And then, there were the fleets. At first, the fleets seemed to disappear. Patrols that once crossed trade routes went missing. Colonies reported fewer ships coming and going. To outsiders, it looked as if humans were shrinking back in fear. But in reality, those ships were gathering, pulled inward like the tide before a great wave. The forgotten species grew bold. They took more worlds. They mocked humanity openly in the council chambers. They claimed humans had been broken, their fire extinguished before it could rise. But in secret, other alien races began to worry. A merchant captain remembered docking on a human station. He told his people later, "I saw no laughter in their eyes, only cold fire. I saw children training with weapons. I saw engineers who did not rest. I saw silence heavier than war. It was the silence before the storm." The historian listening to the story in the council leaned forward, his voice trembling. Did no one try to stop it? Did no one warn the forgotten species what they were waking? An elder sighed, his long claws tapping against the table. We tried. Some of us begged them to stop. We told them humans were not like others. But arrogance is a chain too heavy to break. They laughed at our warnings. In his mind, the historian could almost see it. The humans quiet and waiting, the forgotten species blind and mocking. Two lines moving closer and closer to each other, until they would finally collide. One counselor remembered it clearly. He spoke with a voice that still shook. I was there when the first human dreadnought left dock. We had never seen a ship so vast, so terrible. It was not built to defend. It was built to erase. The historian felt his chest tighten. What did it look like? He asked. The elder's eyes grew dark. It was a mountain of steel and fire. The shadow covered the stars. When it moved, it was like watching judgment itself awaken. The forgotten species received reports of this new creation. But instead of fear, they laughed once again. A single ship cannot break an empire, they said. But it was not a single ship. It was the first of many. Across Sol, hidden in silence, humanity had been building a storm. Carriers, dreadnoughts, orbital weapons, all waiting. They were patient. They would not strike until the time was right. And when they struck, they would not stop. The elder leaned closer to the historian, his voice low. Do you know what it feels like to watch a storm gather? The skies grow heavy. The air grows still. And every creature knows something is coming. That was how the galaxy felt. We all knew. We all waited. And yet the forgotten species did not believe. The historian whispered. Then that was their second mistake. The elder nodded slowly. Yes, their second mistake was believing silence meant safety. They did not understand that silence is the sound of blades being sharpened. The chamber grew silent again, as if even the stars outside had paused to listen. The storm was coming. It had a name, a face, a will. And when it broke, nothing in the galaxy would be the same again. The galaxy waited in silence, and then came the moment no one could forget. The first meeting after the insult. The first contact that was not about peace but about warning. The forgotten species sent their envoys across the stars, draped in golden robes, carried in ships that shone like jewels. They were proud, arrogant, smiling as if they had already won. To them, humanity was already broken, already humbled by the burning of their colony. They came not to apologize but to mock. The Galactic Council gathered to watch. Every race wanted to see what the humans would do. Would they beg for forgiveness? Would they promise obedience? Would they try to explain their silence? Instead, the chamber shook when a shadow passed across the stars. At first, it seemed like an eclipse, a great black shape moving slowly, blotting out the light. Then it grew larger, darker, heavier, until the whole chamber trembled with whispers. It was not a moon. It was not a station. It was a ship, a human dreadnought. The envoy of the forgotten species laughed when he saw it. This is your answer? He jeered. One ship? Do you believe a single shadow will frighten us? But the council did not laugh. Their eyes were fixed on the monster in the sky. It was not like any vessel they had seen. Its hull was thick with armor. Its engines burned like suns, and its weapons glowed with the promise of destruction. It did not look like a ship built for war. It looked like a ship built for judgment. The dreadnought did not speak with ambassadors. It did not send polite messages or long speeches. It sent one voice, a single human voice that echoed through the council chamber and across the stars. Leave or burn. Those were the only words. The envoy of the forgotten species laughed again. Your silence has broken you. Your words are empty. You cannot erase us with a single ship. But the other races in the chamber shifted uneasily. They had watched humanity grow. They had seen the silence. And now they looked into the void and felt the weight of that warning. It was not the voice of fear. It was not the voice of weakness. It was the voice of finality. The humans did not argue. They did not explain. They gave only one warning, and everyone in the chamber understood what that meant. The forgotten species, still blind in their arrogance, waved the warning aside. They laughed in the faces of the council. Humans are children, they said. Let them play with their shadows. We are not afraid. But fear was not the point. Back on Earth, fleets waited in silence. Carriers slept in the dark of Saturn's rings. Weapons floated in the hidden blackness of the Oort cloud. Every piece was ready, every blade sharpened. Humanity did not need them to be afraid. Humanity needed them to make one final mistake. The envoy's laughter echoed in the chamber, but no human replied. The dreadnought turned slowly, like a mountain moving across the stars, and vanished into the black. That silence was worse than any threat. One elder of the council, who still remembered those days, leaned close to the historian who had asked the questions. His voice was like cold iron. Do you know what it means when humans give only one warning? The historian swallowed, shaking his head. It means there will never be a second. The forgotten species went home, laughing at what they thought was human weakness. They believed their lesson had been taught, that their power had been proven. They celebrated in their great halls, their leaders boasting that humanity would soon crawl back into the dirt of Earth where it belonged. But in the shadows of Seoul, the storm was already awake. The first contact was not a plea. It was not an attempt at peace. It was the last chance. And the forgotten species had thrown it away with laughter. The historian trembled, his mind full of questions. He asked softly, "Why did the humans not strike then? Why wait longer?" The elder's eyes darkened. Because wrath is patient. Because judgment does not rush. Humans were not planning a battle. They were planning an ending. The chamber fell silent once again. The memory of that first dreadnought, of that last warning, hung in the air like a storm cloud that had yet to break. The historian realized the truth. The forgotten species had believed they were safe. They thought words could protect them, that arrogance could shield them. But in that moment they had already sealed their fate. For when humans say, "Leave or burn," only one choice remains, and the galaxy waited, breathless, for the storm to fall. For months the galaxy held its breath. The forgotten species continued their arrogance, mocking humanity, blind to what was coming. They thought the humans were too weak, too slow, too new to the stars. They thought the first dreadnought was only a bluff. They were wrong. When the storm finally came, it did not begin with words. It began with silence and then with fire. The first strike came at the edges of the forgotten species empire. Their patrol fleets were proud, shining with banners of victory. But one by one they vanished. Whole task forces went missing. At first, their leaders thought it was chance, an accident, a hidden enemy. But then reports arrived, reports written in fear. They came out of the black. They did not speak. They tore us apart and left no survivors. The humans had unleashed their fleets. The dreadnoughts moved like mountains, each one a floating fortress. Carriers released swarms of smaller ships, fast and precise, striking like blades in the dark. Orbital cannons rained destruction upon planets that once felt safe. The forgotten species had thought themselves hunters. Now they were prey. Entire worlds screamed for help. Their fleets gathered, confident in their numbers, but numbers meant nothing. Human ships cut through them with silence and fury. Battles that once lasted weeks ended in hours. The skies burned, and the survivors whispered one truth. Humanity was not fighting for victory. Humanity was fighting for erasure. In the Galactic Council, fear spread like wildfire. Other species watched the war from afar, their hearts heavy with dread. They had seen wars before, but never like this. Most wars ended with treaties, with negotiations, with promises of peace. But this war was different. The humans gave no terms, no offers, no mercy. A single warning had already been given: leave or burn. The forgotten species had laughed. Now there was only fire. The historian, sitting in the chamber as the elders spoke, could barely breathe. His mind painted the scenes. Fleets collapsing, cities falling, stars burning. He whispered, "Did they ever beg for peace?" The elder nodded slowly. Yes, they begged. They cried. Their leaders screamed for mercy in every language they knew. But humanity did not answer. Because wrath does not answer. On one world after another, the forgotten species raised white flags. They sent desperate envoys, promising tribute, promising loyalty, promising never to harm humans again. But the human fleets did not stop. They silenced every signal, crushed every defense, and burned every city. The wrath of humanity was not only in ships. It was in their eyes, in their silence, in the way they fought without hesitation. Soldiers marched through ruined cities, not with joy, but with grim purpose. They were not celebrating. They were cleansing. The forgotten species had mocked them, had killed their children, had thought them weak. Now humanity showed them what weakness truly meant. Weakness was begging for life when no one would listen. Weakness was being erased, knowing no one would ever remember your name. The council elder's voice shook as he remembered. I saw their homeworld fall. I watched from afar as the human fleets closed in. They gave no warning, no demand, no chance. The skies turned red. Their oceans boiled. Their cities crumbled. And when it was over, there was nothing left. Not ruins. Not survivors. Nothing. The historian trembled. His voice cracked as he asked, "Why so much destruction? Why erase them completely?" The elder's eyes were cold. "Because humans do not fight to balance scales. They fight to end injustice. When patience breaks, they do not aim to punish. They aim to finish. And finish they did." The forgotten species, once proud and loud, was silenced. Their fleets shattered, their worlds burning, their leaders gone. Not a single stronghold remained. No planet carried their songs, no station carried their flags. The wrath of humanity had swept through them like a storm of fire. But what made it worse, what made it unforgettable, was not only the destruction. It was the silence that followed. Humans did not celebrate. They did not cheer in victory. They only erased, and then moved on, leaving nothing behind but ash and whispers. The historian felt the weight of it in his chest. He realized the truth. The wrath of humans was not just war. It was judgment. And once it was unleashed, nothing could stand in its path. The elder leaned forward, his voice low, almost a growl. The galaxy learned that day. Never mistake silence for fear. Never mistake patience for weakness. And never, ever make humans angry. The chamber fell into silence again. Even the stars outside seemed to grow still, as if they, too, remembered the wrath that once burned across the galaxy. The historian's hands shook as he wrote the words. Wrath had been unleashed, and with it, a truth that would haunt the galaxy forever. The war was over, but silence remained. Silence heavier than the roar of fleets and the fire of battles. Where the forgotten species once stood, there was only emptiness. Their fleets gone, their worlds dust, their leaders ashes. But the wrath of humanity did not end with their destruction. It went further. It reached into memory itself. Across the galaxy, records began to vanish. In council archives, pages turned blank. In libraries on distant moons, ancient data cores flickered and went dark. Even the oldest AI historians erased whole sections of their knowledge. Whenever anyone searched for the forgotten species, they found only silence. The historian in the council chamber leaned forward, his voice shaking. Why erase their name? Destroying them was not enough. An elder looked at him with tired eyes. No, to destroy their bodies was punishment, but to destroy their name was judgment. Humanity wanted them not only dead, but forgotten. The historian frowned. But why? Why remove every trace? The elder's voice was slow and heavy. Because remembrance is honor. Even to be remembered as an enemy is still to exist. Humanity decided they did not deserve even that. They would not be remembered as conquerors or victims or even fools. They would be remembered as nothing. And so it began the erasure. At first, other species resisted. Some scholars tried to preserve old records. Some historians tried to speak the name in secret. But strange things happened. Ships carrying those records vanished. Scholars who whispered the name grew silent, their voices fading from council halls. No one knew if humans hunted them or if fear itself swallowed them. Soon no one dared. The forgotten species vanished not only from space but from thought. Their statues were torn down, their symbols broken, their language erased. Even their allies, who once called them friends, grew afraid to speak of them. It was as if the galaxy itself agreed. This species never existed. The historian's hands shook as he listened. But this is impossible. How can an entire people vanish from memory? The elder leaned closer. Do not ask how. Ask why. Humanity does not want victory written in songs. They want silence written in fear. Every race that hears this silence remembers one thing. Never make humans angry. That is the only memory that survives. The historian closed his eyes, imagining the empty stars where once an empire had thrived. He imagined children who would never be remembered, cities that would never be named, stories that would never be told. It was more than death. It was annihilation of existence. The elder's voice grew darker. There are many kinds of death, but the worst is when your name dies with you. The forgotten species suffered that death. Their fire was not only extinguished, it was erased. Other council members shifted uncomfortably, as if the memory itself weighed on them. One spoke softly. I once tried to remember their name. I thought I knew it. But when I opened my mouth, the word vanished from my mind. It is as if humanity cut the sound from the universe itself. The historian shivered. It was not just war. It was not just wrath. It was something deeper, something that reached beyond destruction. Humanity had chosen to erase even the story. And yet, the story survived, but only as a warning. Across the galaxy, when races spoke of human wrath, they did not speak of battles or victories. They spoke of silence. They spoke of the empire that once was, but no longer is. An empire whose name cannot be spoken. An empire erased from history itself. The historian finally whispered, almost afraid to ask, "Does no one truly know their name anymore?" The elder shook his head. "No, not even us. Not even the oldest among us. Humanity made sure of it. The only words left are these. They were the last species that made humans angry. And that was the end of them." The chamber grew cold again. The stars outside seemed distant, as if the galaxy itself had pulled back from the memory. The historian's hands trembled as he wrote the last line of his notes. He realized that this was not only a warning for one species. It was a warning for all. Humanity did not seek conquest. Humanity did not seek endless war. But when provoked, when patience ended, they did not simply destroy. They erased. And in that erasure, they wrote the most chilling lesson of all. To be remembered is life. To be forgotten is true death. The forgotten species suffered both. The historian looked up, his face pale. Then the silence itself is the weapon. The elder nodded slowly. Yes, the silence is the legacy of human wrath. And with that, the chamber fell into the same silence that had followed the war. Silent, heavy, endless. The kind of silence that kills names and buries them forever in the dark. The council chamber was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed into the bones. The young historian sat frozen, his notes half-written, his mind drowning in the weight of what he had heard. An entire species erased, not just in body, but in name. A people forgotten so completely that even memory itself had been burned away. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. How can silence be stronger than fire? Stronger than warships? The elder leaned forward, his eyes glowing with the memory of long centuries. Because fire destroys, but silence endures. Fire ends battles. Silence ends legacies. That is the difference. That is why no one remembers them. The historian felt a shiver run down his spine. He thought of his own people, his own world. If humans could erase one species, could they erase others? Could they erase everyone? The elder seemed to read his thoughts. His voice was low, heavy with warning. Do not mistake this. Humanity is not endless war. They do not hunger for conquest. They do not crave the galaxy. But if you wound them, if you cross the line where patience ends, then you will see what no one survives. The chamber was filled with silence again. A silence that was not empty, but alive with fear. The historian's hand trembled as he wrote the last words of his record. The last species that made humans angry does not have a name. They have only silence. He raised his head, his voice weak. But if no one remembers their name, how do we remember the warning? The elder closed his eyes. Because the warning is not in their name. It is in the silence. Every race who hears this story does not ask who they were. They ask who they should never become. The words struck the historian like thunder. He realized the truth. The forgotten species had not only been destroyed for their arrogance. They had been turned into an eternal lesson. Their punishment was not simply death. It was to become an empty shadow, an eternal silence that would frighten all who heard of it. And across the galaxy that silence remained. It echoed in council halls when leaders spoke too proudly of their power. It whispered in the ears of generals who thought themselves invincible. It crept into the dreams of rulers who planned to strike at human colonies. They all remembered the same thing. Never make humans angry, because anger could be endured. Hatred could be reasoned with. But wrath, the kind of wrath that erases names, could never be stopped once unleashed. The historian looked out of the tall crystal windows of the chamber. The stars shone like cold eyes, watching silently. Somewhere among those stars, the ashes of the forgotten species still drifted. But no one would ever know which stars they belonged to. No one would ever sing their songs again. No one would even whisper their name. And that was the greatest punishment of all. The elder finally spoke again, his voice little more than a whisper. Do you understand now, child? Why we do not speak of them? Why their name was cut from our tongues? The historian nodded slowly, his throat dry. Yes, because remembering them would give them life. But humans chose to take even that away. The elder's gaze was sharp as a blade. And do you understand the lesson? The historian hesitated. That humans must never be provoked. The elder nodded. Good. Remember that. Teach it. Let the silence remain. For silence is not emptiness. It is the shadow of wrath. The historian closed his notes. His heart was heavy, his mind full of fear. He realized then that the story was not about the forgotten species at all. It was about humanity, about the truth that all the galaxy had learned and would never forget. And the truth was this: when humans rise in wrath, they do not leave behind ruins. They leave behind silence. A silence so complete that even a name cannot escape it. The council chamber dimmed as the meeting ended. One by one, the elders left, their footsteps echoing against the floor. The historian sat alone, staring at the stars. They glittered like endless witnesses to the past. And in that glitter, he thought he could almost hear the faint echo of a voice, long gone, whispering from the dark. But the words were gone. The name was gone. Only silence remained. And that silence was louder than any scream.